Give me an heir. Those 4 words fell from his lips like a death sentence, spoken in a voice so calm it could have been ordering coffee. I stood frozen in the marble-floored study, my fingers numb around the cheap handle of my suitcase, staring at the man seated behind an ornate mahogany desk. This was Konstantin Volkov, the man my father had sold me to. I'd expected a decrepit old man, someone I could manipulate, outlast, maybe even escape from once his ancient heart gave out. The file my father had shown me, poorly photocopied, years old, had depicted a silver-haired man in his 60s. I'd built my entire survival strategy around the assumption that time was on my side. I was wrong. The man rising from behind that desk moved like a predator. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair swept back from a face that looked carved from stone. His age showed in the lines around his eyes, the weathered quality of his skin, but there was nothing weak about him. He wore a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than my father's house, and when he moved around the desk toward me, every armed guard in the room straightened. "You're younger than I expected," he said, studying me with eyes the color of winter ice. 20? Yes. My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. Good. Young enough to bear healthy children, old enough to understand what's expected of you. The words hit me like a slap. This wasn't going to be a marriage in name only. This wasn't going to be a business arrangement I could negotiate my way out of. The casual way he spoke about my body, my future, my children, as if I were livestock being appraised, made my stomach turn. I started, but he raised one hand. The gesture was slight. He didn't even look at me when he did it. But every guard in the room shifted, and I felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing. The words died in my throat. "You will be my wife," Konstantin continued, returning to his desk and pouring himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "You will bear my heir. In exchange, your father's debt is forgiven. Your family lives. This is not a negotiation, Rory. This is how things are." He knew my name. Of course he did. He probably knew everything about me. My high school grades, my favorite color, how many times I'd tried to run away before my father's men dragged me onto the plane to Moscow. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw my suitcase at his head and claw my way out of this gilded prison. But I was 20 years old, 5,000 miles from home, in a country where I didn't speak the language, surrounded by men with guns who answered to the silver-haired monster calmly sipping his vodka. "What if I say no?" I whispered. Architected narrative tension and pacing for Mafia romance story. Good opening. I've established the shocking command immediately, her underestimation of him, expecting someone weak. The realization she's trapped, his cold dominance. The stakes now, I need to continue, building the tension and move into the arrival-transaction phase. I should aim for around 18,000, 22,000 words total. Let me continue with strong emotional beats and pacing. For the first time, he looked directly at me, really looked at me. Those ice blue eyes traveled over my face with the same clinical assessment he might give a financial report. Then he smiled, a slight curve of his mouth that held no warmth whatsoever. "Then I kill your father," he said simply. "Then your mother. Then your sister. Then I find you, wherever you run, and I bring you back here anyway. The only difference is that you watch everyone you love die first. So I ask you, Rory Brennan, do you want to say no?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My sister, Emily. She was 16. She'd cried when they'd taken me to the airport, begged our father not to do this. The image of her face swam before my eyes. "No," I breathed. "I don't want to say no." "Good." Konstantin set down his glass. "Yuri will show you to your room. We marry in 3 days. I suggest you use that time to adjust." He dismissed me with a wave of his hand, returning his attention to the papers on his desk as if I'd already ceased to exist. A guard, Yuri, apparently, gripped my arm and steered me toward the door. I looked back once. Konstantin hadn't moved, hadn't looked up, hadn't acknowledged my exit at all. He'd delivered his command and expected it to be obeyed. That was when the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I was completely and utterly trapped. The room they gave me was bigger than my entire apartment back in Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Moscow at night, the city sprawling beneath me like a galaxy of lights. The bed could have fit 4 people comfortably. There was a bathroom with heated marble floors, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in my exact size, and a sitting area with a fireplace that crackled with real flames. It was a beautiful cage. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I stood at those massive windows and stared out at the foreign city below, trying to process the impossible situation I'd found myself in. 3 days ago, I'd been a college sophomore studying art history. I'd had friends, a part-time job at a coffee shop, plans to study abroad in Florence. My biggest worry had been whether I'd get an A on my Renaissance art paper. Then my father had shown up at my dorm. I'd known something was wrong immediately. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he'd had on the last time I'd seen him 2 months ago. He'd grabbed my arm and pulled me outside, speaking in rapid, desperate whispers. Gambling debts, the Russian mob, money he couldn't pay back. They'd given him a choice, his life or his daughter. I'd thought he was joking. My father was a drunk and a gambler, sure, but he wouldn't actually sell me. That was medieval. That was impossible. Then 3 men in suits had appeared, and I'd learned exactly how possible it was. Now I stood in a luxury prison in Moscow, promised in marriage to a man older than my father, expected to bear his children like some kind of medieval broodmare. And there was no escape, no cavalry coming to rescue me, no way out. A knock on the door made me jump. "Come in," I said, hating how shaky my voice sounded. An older woman entered, her iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple black dress and carried herself with the kind of rigid posture that suggested military training. "I am Irina," she said in heavily accented English. "I am housekeeper. I help you prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For marriage. For life here. Mr. Volkov has expectations." The way she said it made my skin crawl. But there was something in her eyes, not quite sympathy, but a kind of weary understanding. She'd probably seen this before. Girls like me, brought here against their will, expected to fall in line. "What kind of expectations?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Irina moved to the closet, pulling out a simple black dress. "Tomorrow, you meet with doctor. Medical examination. Mr. Volkov must know you are capable of bearing children." Heat flooded my face. "Are you serious?" "Yes, this is not negotiable. After doctor, you meet with lawyer. You sign papers. Then, in 3 days, wedding. After wedding." She paused, her expression carefully neutral. "After wedding, you are wife. You understand?" I understood perfectly. After the wedding, Konstantin would expect me to fulfill my end of the bargain, to give him the heir he'd demanded. The thought made me feel sick. "What if I can't?" I asked quietly. "What if I can't have children?" Irina's expression softened, just slightly. "Then you pray, Devichka. You pray very hard." She left the dress on the bed and departed without another word, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. I couldn't do this. I couldn't marry a man I'd just met. A man old enough to be my grandfather. A man who looked at me like I was a business transaction. I couldn't let him touch me, own me, use my body to create his legacy. But what choice did I have? I thought of Emily. Sweet, innocent Emily, who'd never done anything wrong in her life except have the misfortune of sharing my father's blood. If I ran, she'd pay the price. If I refused, she'd pay the price. My survival was the only thing keeping my family alive. For the first time since boarding the plane to Moscow, I let myself cry. The medical examination was humiliating. The doctor was professional but cold, treating me like a piece of machinery being inspected for defects. He poked, prodded, took blood samples, asked invasive questions about my menstrual cycle and sexual history. I sat on the examination table in a paper gown, shaking with equal parts cold and rage, and endured it all in silence. When it was over, the doctor spoke to Yuri in rapid Russian. I caught my name and what sounded like approval. Apparently, I'd passed the test. I was fertile, healthy, suitable for breeding. The thought made bile rise in my throat. The lawyer's office was in the same building, 3 floors up. He was an older man with kind eyes who spoke perfect English and seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the whole situation. "These are the marriage contracts," he explained, spreading papers across his desk. "If you sign, you become Mrs. Volkov. In the event of Mr. Volkov's death, you inherit a trust fund sufficient to support yourself comfortably. However, if you produce an heir, the trust increases substantially. If you attempt to leave before producing an heir, you forfeit all rights and protections." "What kind of protections?" I asked. "Legal protections, financial protections, personal security." He hesitated. "Mr. Volkov has many enemies, Mrs. Brennan. As his wife, you will be a target, but you will also be untouchable. No one would dare harm you without risking Mr. Volkov's wrath." Great. I was trading one form of captivity for another. I scanned the contracts, but the legal language was dense and complicated. I had no lawyer of my own, no one to advise me, no way to know if these papers were even legitimate or just elaborate props in Constantine's game. "What if I don't sign?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. The lawyer's expression grew grave. "Then you and your family have a very short time left on this earth." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Brennan. I truly am. But Mr. Volkov is not a man who accepts refusal." I picked up the pen. My hand shook as I signed my name on line after line, legally binding myself to a monster. With each signature, I felt a piece of my freedom slip away. By the time I reached the final page, I felt hollowed out. Empty. "It's done," the lawyer said quietly. "The wedding is in 2 days. I hope you find some happiness in this arrangement." I didn't bother responding. There was no happiness to be found here. Only survival. I didn't see Constantine again until the wedding day. I'd spent 2 days alone in that beautiful prison of a room, eating meals delivered by Irina, staring out at Moscow's skyline, and trying to figure out how I'd ended up here. The clothes in the closet fit perfectly. The bathroom was stocked with expensive toiletries and cosmetics. Everything had been chosen for me, prepared for me, decided without my input. On the morning of the wedding, Irina arrived with a team of stylists. They descended on me like a flock of birds, tugging at my hair, applying makeup with practiced efficiency, speaking to each other in rapid Russian that I couldn't understand. I sat in the chair and let them work, feeling like a doll being dressed up for display. The wedding dress was beautiful. I could admit that much. White silk that hugged my curves before flowing into a simple train. Long sleeves, a high neckline. It was elegant and modest and probably cost more than my father's gambling debts. When they finally let me look, in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The girl staring back looked older, more sophisticated. Her dark hair had been styled in loose waves, her makeup subtle but perfect. She looked like she belonged in this world of wealth and power, but her eyes were terrified. "Beautiful," Irina said softly, standing behind me, "like princess." Princesses don't get sold to pay off their father's debts, I muttered. She didn't argue. The wedding was held in a small chapel on Constantine's estate. I'd expected something grand, some massive display of wealth and power. Instead, it was intimate, just a handful of witnesses, including several stern-faced men in expensive suits who were probably Constantine's business associates. No flowers, no music, no celebration, just a legal binding that would change my life forever. Constantine was already waiting at the altar when I arrived. He wore a black suit, his silver hair immaculate, his expression unreadable. When I walked down the short aisle, he watched me with those ice-blue eyes, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. The priest spoke in Russian. I didn't understand a word, but the ceremony was short and perfunctory. When it came time for the vows, Yuri translated in a low voice. Do you, Rory Brennan, take Konstantin Volkov to be your lawfully wedded husband? Every cell in my body screamed no. But I looked at Constantine's face, saw the absolute certainty there, and knew there was only one acceptable answer. I do, I whispered. Do you, Konstantin Volkov, take Rory Brennan to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was firm, emotionless, as if he were confirming a business transaction. The priest said something else, and then Constantine was reaching for my hand. His fingers were warm, his grip firm as he slid a ring onto my finger. A massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones, the band platinum. It was gorgeous and terrifying. When I looked up, Constantine was closer than I'd expected. For a moment I thought he might kiss me. That was how weddings ended, right? But he simply stared down at me with those cold eyes, his expression giving away nothing. You are mine now, he said quietly, so only I could hear. Do you understand what that means? No, I admitted, my voice barely audible. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or approval. Good. Honesty is better than false compliance. Come, we have dinner to attend. He kept hold of my hand as he led me out of the chapel, his grip possessive but not painful. The witnesses followed behind us, their footsteps echoing on the stone floors. I was married. I was Mrs. Konstantin Volkov, and I had no idea what happened next. Dinner was held in a formal dining room that could have seated 50 people. Instead, it was just Constantine and me at opposite ends of a long table, with his associates seated along the sides. The food was elaborate, course after course of Russian delicacies that I barely tasted. I was too aware of Constantine, watching me from the other end of the table, too conscious of being the only woman in a room full of dangerous men. They spoke in Russian, their conversation flowing around me like a river I couldn't navigate. Occasionally, one of them would glance my way, and I'd see assessment in their eyes. Calculation. Some of them looked at me with pity, others with barely concealed contempt. I was the American girl, the debt payment, the broodmare brought in to provide an heir. When the meal finally ended, Constantine stood. Gentlemen, he said in English, clearly for my benefit. Thank you for bearing witness. Please excuse us. My wife and I have matters to attend to. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading. He was going to take me to his bedroom and expect me to fulfill my wifely duties, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. But instead of leading me upstairs, Constantine guided me to his study, the same room where we'd first met. He closed the door behind us, shutting out the guards and associates, leaving us alone. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair. I sat, my hands twisted together in my lap, the wedding dress pooling around me like a white flag of surrender. Constantine moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the Moscow night. For a long moment, he said nothing, and the silence stretched between us like a physical thing. You're afraid of me, he finally said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I admitted. There was no point lying. Good. Fear will keep you from doing something stupid. He turned to face me. But I am not a monster, Rory. I will not force myself on you tonight. Relief flooded through me, so intense it left me dizzy. You won't? No. You are my wife now, yes. But you are also terrified, exhausted, and far from home. Taking you to my bed in such a state would be— He paused, searching for the word. Uncivilized. I am many things, but I am not uncivilized. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this unexpected mercy with the man who'd threatened to kill my entire family. Then why did you demand I give you an heir? Why go through all of this if you're not going to— I said not tonight, Constantine interrupted, his voice sharp. I did not say never. You will share my bed, Rory. You will bear my children. But I am 67 years old. I have learned patience. I can wait until you are ready. And if I'm never ready? He smiled that cold smile again. Then I will make you ready. But I prefer willing participation to terrified submission. So I give you time. A week perhaps. Maybe 2. Use it wisely. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. You have your own room. Irina will show you. We will maintain separate quarters until you are ready to consummate this marriage. But make no mistake, Rory. You will be ready. One way or another. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the study with my racing thoughts. I sat there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. Constantine had given me a reprieve, a temporary stay of execution, but it was still a death sentence with a delayed timeline. Eventually, Irina appeared and led me to my new quarters. They were next to Constantine's master suite, close enough that he could reach me easily, far enough that I could pretend to have some privacy. That night, I lay in the massive bed in my wedding dress, staring at the ceiling, and tried to figure out how I was going to survive this. The first week was strange. I barely saw Constantine. He left early in the morning and returned late at night, his days consumed by whatever business a Russian mob boss conducted. I was left alone in the mansion with Irina and the ever-present guards, floating through the days like a ghost. I explored the mansion, learning its layout. 3 floors, dozens of rooms, most of them unused. A library filled with books in multiple languages. A gym equipped with every machine imaginable. A pool in the basement, heated to bathwater temperature. The grounds were equally impressive. Manicured gardens, a greenhouse, even a small lake. It was all beautiful, all expensive, all mine to use, and all utterly meaningless when I couldn't leave. I tried the gates once, on day 3. Walked right up to them and attempted to push them open. 2 guards materialized immediately, blocking my path without saying a word. I'd stood there, staring at the iron bars, feeling the weight of my captivity settle over me like a blanket. This was my life now. Luxury and imprisonment in equal measure. On day 7, Constantine summoned me to dinner. It was just the 2 of us this time, seated at a smaller table in a more intimate dining room. He'd shed his suit jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with scars and tattoos. I tried not to stare at them, but I could see the edge of what looked like a serpent coiling up his right arm. You've been exploring, he said as the first course was served. Irina tells me you've visited every room in the house. I was bored, I said, then immediately worried I'd been too honest. But Constantine merely nodded. Understandable. You are young. You are accustomed to freedom. This must be difficult. Difficult is one word for it, I muttered, pushing food around my plate. You could make it easier on yourself, he said calmly. Accept your situation. Embrace your role. Many women would be grateful for what you have. I looked up at him, anger flaring in my chest. Grateful? You bought me. You're keeping me prisoner. You expect me to have your babies like I'm some kind of... Careful. His voice didn't rise, but something in his tone made me swallow my words. I understand you are angry. You have every right to be. But you will speak to me with respect, Rory. I am your husband, and more importantly, I am the only thing standing between your family and a shallow grave. Remember that. The reminder was like ice water over my anger. He was right. No matter how much I hated this, no matter how trapped I felt, my compliance was the price of my family's safety. I'm sorry, I said stiffly. No, you're not. But you will be polite anyway, because you are intelligent enough to understand the stakes. He took a sip of his wine. I have a proposition for you. My stomach clenched. What kind of proposition? You are bored. You are restless. This is understandable. So I will give you something to do. Starting tomorrow, you will begin lessons. Lessons in what? Russian language, self-defense, history and culture of my world. You are my wife now. You must be able to navigate this life with competence. Ignorance will make you vulnerable, and I cannot have a vulnerable wife. I stared at him. You're going to teach me to fight? No. I will have experts teach you to fight. I will ensure you learn to speak Russian fluently. I will give you the tools to survive in this world. What you choose to do with those tools is up to you. It was the first glimpse of agency I'd had since arriving in Moscow. The first suggestion that I might have some control over my own life, even in these circumstances. Why? I asked. Why give me these skills? Konstantin leaned back in his chair, studying me with those pale eyes. Because a fearful, ignorant wife is useless to me. Because I need a partner, not a pet. And because... He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. Because you remind me of someone. Someone who would have wanted better for you than to be a cowering prisoner in a golden cage. Who? That is not a story for tonight. He stood, signaling the end of dinner. Your first lesson begins at 9 tomorrow morning. I suggest you sleep well. He left me there, my mind spinning with questions. But for the first time since my arrival, I felt something other than fear and despair. I felt curious. My Russian tutor was a severe woman named Svetlana, who had no patience for mistakes and less sympathy for my situation. Again, she barked when I mispronounced a word. The tongue must be at the roof of mouth. Like this. Zdravstvuyte. Stra. Oh, forget it. I muttered, slumping in my chair. No forgetting. You learn or you fail. Mr. Volkov does not accept failure. I gritted my teeth and tried again. And again. And again. Until my tongue felt twisted and my head ached with new vocabulary. Svetlana was merciless, drilling me for 3 hours straight before finally releasing me. My self-defense instructor was the opposite, patient, encouraging, and surprisingly kind. His name was Alexei, and he was built like a tank. Mrs. Volkov, he greeted me with a slight bow. I am honored to teach you. You don't have to call me that, I said, uncomfortable with the title. But you are Mrs. Volkov, wife of most powerful man in Moscow. This means something, yes? It means I was sold to pay off a debt, I said bitterly. Alexei's expression grew serious. Perhaps. But now you are here. Now you learn to protect yourself. This is good thing. Come. We start with basics. He taught me how to stand, how to protect my center of gravity, how to break a grip if someone grabbed my wrist. It was exhausting and frustrating, and I wasn't naturally athletic, but there was something empowering about learning these skills. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was doing something. Learning, growing, taking some tiny measure of control over my situation. The lessons became my routine. 3 hours of Russian with Svetlana each morning. 2 hours of self-defense with Alexei in the afternoon. Then dinner. either alone or occasionally with Constantine, who would quiz me on my progress. "What did you learn today?" he'd ask. "That I'm terrible at rolling my R's," I'd respond, or that I'm strong enough to break someone's nose if they grab me from behind. He'd nod approvingly, ask another question, push me to explain my reasoning. These dinners became a kind of examination, and I found myself wanting to impress him, not because I liked him, but because I refused to be seen as weak or stupid. Weeks passed, then a month. I was getting better at Russian, picking up phrases and understanding more of the conversations happening around me. I was getting stronger too, my muscles adapting to the rigorous training. Alexei had moved me from basic defensive moves to more advanced techniques. "You are a natural fighter," he told me one afternoon, after I'd successfully disarmed him in a drill. "Very good instincts." "I had good motivation," I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Learn or die." "Is not so dramatic, yes? Isn't it?" I challenged. "This isn't a normal life, Alexei. I'm a prisoner here." His expression grew somber. "Perhaps, but prisoner who grows stronger is better than prisoner who stays weak. You understand?" I did understand. These lessons were Constantine's way of molding me into something useful, but they were also giving me tools I could use, knowledge I could leverage. If I ever found a way to escape, these skills might be the difference between success and failure. Not that escape seemed possible. The guards were always present. The gates were always locked. And even if I made it out, where would I go? I had no money, no documents, barely spoke the language, and running would mean condemning my family to death. I was trapped by invisible chains far stronger than any physical lock. 2 months after the wedding, Constantine invited me to accompany him to a formal event. "It's a charity gala," he explained over dinner. "Important people will be there, politicians, businessmen, members of high society. You will attend as my wife." My stomach clenched. Why? Because a married man who never appears with his wife raises questions. Because you are part of my world now, whether you like it or not. And because... He paused, considering his words. "Because I want them to see you." "See me as what? Your property?" "See you as my partner. There is a difference, Rory, even if you don't recognize it yet." The gala was being held at one of Moscow's most prestigious hotels. Irina spent the entire day preparing me, with the same team of stylists descending on my room like a well-organized army. This time, the dress was midnight blue, cut to fit my body like a second skin before flowing into a dramatic train. Diamond earrings, hair swept up in an elegant twist. Makeup that made my eyes look mysterious and dangerous. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Constantine was waiting at the bottom of the stairs when I descended. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light. When he saw me, something shifted in his expression, a flash of appreciation, maybe even desire, before his usual mask of control slid back into place. "You look acceptable," he said, which was apparently high praise from him. "You look old," I replied, then immediately regretted it. But Constantine merely laughed, a rare sound that surprised us both. "Honest as always. Come, the car is waiting." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. His body was warm and solid beneath the expensive fabric of his suit, and I tried not to think about the fact that this was the closest we'd been since the wedding. The drive to the hotel was silent. Constantine reviewed documents while I stared out the window at Moscow's nighttime beauty, trying to calm my racing heart. I'd been isolated for 2 months. This would be my first time in public, my first interaction with people outside Constantine's immediate circle. Maybe someone would help me. Maybe I could find an ally, someone who could... "Don't even think about it," Constantine said quietly, not looking up from his papers. Think about what? Asking for help, making a scene, trying to escape. Now he did look at me, and his eyes were hard. Everyone at this event knows who I am. Many of them fear me. Some owe me favors. None of them will risk my anger to save you. If you embarrass me tonight, you will regret it. Am I clear? Crystal, I said through gritted teeth. Good. He returned to his documents. Stay close to me. Speak only when spoken to. Smile. Be charming. Let them see that you are content as my wife. But I'm not content. Then you should have pursued a career in acting, because tonight, you will give the performance of your life. The hotel was magnificent, all marble columns and glittering chandeliers, with a grand staircase leading up to the ballroom where the gala was being held. Paparazzi lined the red carpet, cameras flashing as wealthy attendees made their entrance. When our car pulled up, the photographers went into a frenzy. Constantine exited first, then turned to help me out. The moment my feet touched the red carpet, I was blinded by camera flashes. People were shouting questions in Russian, and I stood there frozen, overwhelmed by the attention. Constantine's hand settled on the small of my back, warm and possessive. Smile, he murmured in my ear. You are my beautiful young wife. Show them you belong to me. I hated him in that moment, hated his calm assumption of ownership, hated the way his hand on my back felt like a brand, hated that I had to play this role while cameras captured every moment. But I smiled. I smiled like my life depended on it, because it did. I let Constantine guide me up the steps, his hand never leaving my back, his presence overwhelming and inescapable. Inside, the ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across the polished floor. An orchestra played in one corner. Champagne flowed freely, and guests in designer clothes clustered in small groups, their laughter and conversation creating a sophisticated hum. Every eye turned to us as we entered. I felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, saw the curiosity in their faces, the assessment, the judgment. They were sizing me up, these people, wondering who I was, what I meant to Constantine, whether I was worthy of standing beside him. Relax, Constantine said quietly. They won't bite. They're far more afraid of me than you should be of them. Easy for him to say. He belonged here. I was a Chicago girl in a borrowed designer dress, completely out of my depth. But I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and channeled every ounce of fake confidence I could muster. If they wanted to judge me, let them. I'd survived 2 months with Konstantin Volkov. I could survive 1 night of Russian high society. A man approached us, silver-haired, distinguished, with the bearing of old money. He spoke to Konstantin in rapid Russian, his eyes occasionally flickering to me with undisguised curiosity. Konstantin responded, then switched to English. Rory, this is Dmitry Kuznetsov. He owns half the oil fields in Siberia. Dmitry, my wife, Rory. Enchanted, Dmitry said, taking my hand and kissing it in an old-fashioned gesture. Konstantin has been hiding you away. We were beginning to think you were a myth. Not a myth, I said, finding my voice. Just adjusting to my new life. And how are you finding Moscow? Cold? Beautiful? Overwhelming? All true statements that revealed nothing. Dmitry laughed. An honest woman. Careful, Konstantin. This one might be dangerous. I'm counting on it, Konstantin replied, and there was something in his voice that made my breath catch. More people approached. More introductions. More careful conversations where I had to weigh every word. Konstantin never left my side, his presence both protective and possessive. I noticed how people deferred to him, how conversations would pause when he spoke, how even the most powerful men in the room treated him with cautious respect. This was his world, and I was expected to navigate it without drowning. We were making our way toward the bar when a woman intercepted us. She was stunning. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a red gown that looked painted on. She addressed Constantine in Russian, her voice sharp, almost accusatory. I caught my name in the rapid flow of words, and the tone was distinctly hostile. Constantine's expression darkened. He responded in Russian, his voice cold enough to freeze fire. The woman turned to me, switching to accented English. "So you are the American girl, the child he bought to give him babies." The cruelty in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't curiosity. It was an attack. "I'm his wife," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "His wife?" She laughed, the sound cutting. "You are his broodmare, his last desperate attempt to create a legacy before death claims him. How does it feel, knowing you are nothing more than a womb for hire?" Around us, conversations had stopped. People were watching, waiting to see how this would play out. I could feel Constantine tense beside me, feel the anger radiating off him. If I didn't handle this, he would. And from the cold fury in his expression, that handling would be brutal. But I didn't need him to fight my battles. 2 months of fear and frustration boiled over. 2 months of being treated like property, like a thing to be used and controlled. This woman had given voice to my own darkest thoughts, and I refused to let her see how much they hurt. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "You're right," I said clearly, making sure my voice carried. "He bought me. I'm young enough to be his granddaughter. And yes, he expects me to give him an heir. But here's the thing you don't understand. I'm here, wearing his ring, standing beside him at events like this." "Where are you standing?" "Oh, right. Alone. Bitter. Watching the man you clearly want choose someone else. So tell me, who's really desperate here?" The woman's face turned scarlet. She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "You want to judge me? Fine. But I survived losing everything to be here. I learned a new language. I'm learning to defend myself. I'm adapting to a life I never chose, and I'm doing it with more grace than you're showing right now. So if you want to stand there and insult me, go ahead. But know that I'm not some weak little girl you can intimidate. I've been through worse than you could imagine." Silence fell over the ballroom. The woman stared at me, fury and shock warring on her face. Then she turned on her heel and stalked away, her exit less dramatic than she probably intended. I realized I was shaking. My hands were clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. Around us, conversation slowly resumed, though I could feel eyes on me, assessing this new development. Constantine's hand touched my elbow, firm but not harsh. "Come," he said quietly. "We need air." He guided me through the crowd, out onto a balcony overlooking Moscow's glittering skyline. The cold air hit my overheated skin like a slap, but I welcomed it. I braced my hands on the railing, trying to slow my racing heart. "That was incredibly stupid," Constantine said from behind me. "I know. That woman is Katya Volkov, my late brother's widow. She has powerful connections and a very long memory. I don't care. You should care. She will make you an enemy now." I turned to face him. "She was already my enemy, Constantine. Everyone in there is either my enemy or someone who doesn't care enough to be anything. I'm alone in this. So forgive me for finally standing up for myself." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. Not his usual cold smile, but something warmer, almost proud. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "Fierce, unafraid. Exactly what I hoped you would become." "What? Did you think those lessons were only about language and self-defense?" "I was teaching you to survive in my world, Rory. To develop the strength and confidence you would need. Tonight, you showed me that the lessons have taken root. He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, expensive, masculine, overwhelming. You defended yourself. You defended your position as my wife. You showed everyone in that room that you are not to be underestimated. Do you understand what you've done? Made a powerful enemy? Made a statement. Established yourself as someone worthy of respect. My enemies will think twice before attacking you now. They've seen that you can bite back. I should have been happy with his approval. Instead, I felt manipulated. Is that what this was? A test? You brought me here knowing Katya would attack me, just to see if I'd fight back? Yes, he admitted without shame. And you passed. Brilliantly. Anger flared in my chest. I'm not your project, Constantine. I'm not some experiment for you to shape and mold. I'm a person. I know exactly what you are. He reached out, his fingers trailing along my jaw in a gesture so unexpected it froze me in place. You are strong. You are intelligent. You are far more than I expected when I agreed to this arrangement, and you are wasted on fear and resentment. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. It was the first time he'd touched me with anything resembling tenderness, and the contrast with his usual cold control was jarring. What do you want from me? I whispered. Everything, he said simply. I want your strength, your fire, your loyalty. I want you to stand beside me as my equal, not my possession. But I cannot force that. You must choose it. And if I don't? Then we will exist in this strange limbo forever. Married but separate. Connected but distant. Is that what you want, Rory? I didn't know what I wanted. 2 months ago, I'd wanted to escape, to run as far from this man as possible. But something had changed. The lessons, the challenges, the slow building of competence and confidence, they'd changed me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I didn't love Constantine. I probably never would. But I was beginning to respect him. And more dangerously, I was beginning to want his respect in return. I don't know, I admitted. Then take your time. Figure it out. But know this. He cupped my face in both hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. I have waited 67 years to find someone worthy of carrying my legacy. I can wait a little longer for you to accept your place at my side. He released me and stepped back, the moment of intimacy broken. Come, we should return before people talk. But as we walked back into the ballroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. The balance of power was still heavily in his favor, but I was no longer completely powerless. And that terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me. The weeks following the gala were different. Constantine began including me in more aspects of his life, not the violent criminal parts. I was shielded from that. But the business dinners, the charity events, the social obligations that came with his position. I was presented as his wife, and slowly, grudgingly, Moscow's elite began to accept me. The lessons continued. I was nearly fluent in Russian now, able to follow conversations and respond without Svetlana's constant corrections. My self-defense training had advanced to weapons, how to handle a knife, how to shoot a gun, how to use everyday objects as improvised weapons. Why am I learning all this? I asked Alexei one afternoon, after he'd taught me how to turn a pen into a lethal weapon. Because Mr. Volkov's wife must be able to protect herself, he replied. His enemies are numerous. You are target now. Better to be prepared, yes? I supposed he was right, but part of me wondered if Constantine was preparing me for something specific, some threat he saw coming. My evenings with Constantine had become almost comfortable. We'd dine together, discuss my progress, debate current events and philosophy. He was wickedly intelligent, well-read, able to argue any position with devastating logic. Our conversations challenged me in ways my college classes never had. You disagree with me, he'd say with amusement when I'd counter one of his points. Good. Blind agreement is boring. Defend your position. And I would, marshalling arguments, pushing back against his worldview. Sometimes he'd concede a point. More often, he'd dismantle my logic with surgical precision. But he never made me feel stupid for trying. It was during one of these dinners, 3 months after our wedding, that he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you still fear me, Rory?" I considered lying, but he'd see through it. "Yes, but less than I did." "Why less?" "Because I understand you better now. You're brutal and controlling, and you've done terrible things. But you're not cruel for cruelty's sake. Everything you do has a reason. And that makes it acceptable?" "No. But it makes it predictable. I can work with predictable." He smiled. "You've grown cynical. I'm not sure if I should be proud or concerned." "Both, probably." The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence as we ate. Then Constantine set down his fork and looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I would like to move forward with our arrangement," he said carefully. "I have been patient. I have given you time to adjust. But I am not getting younger, Rory, and I need an heir." My stomach dropped. I'd known this was coming, had been expecting it for weeks. But hearing the words out loud still felt like a punch to the gut. "You said you'd wait until I was ready," I reminded him. "And I have. 3 months. You are stronger now. More confident. You understand this world and your place in it. Are you truly not ready? Or are you simply afraid?" "Both," I admitted. "Constantine, you're old enough to be my grandfather. How am I supposed to look at me and see past the age, see the man?" He stood, moving around the table to stand before me. "I am not the decrepit old man you expected, am I?" He wasn't. Despite his 67 years, Constantine was vital, powerful, imposing. The silver in his hair only made him look more distinguished. The lines on his face spoke of experience, wisdom, survival. His body, though aged, was still strong from decades of training and discipline. "No," I whispered. "You're not." "Then why do you resist? Is it truly my age? Or is it that you haven't given yourself permission to want this?" His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing over my bottom lip. The gesture was possessive but gentle, and I felt my body respond despite my mind's protests. "I don't want this," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Liar." His other hand settled on my waist, pulling me to my feet. "You want structure. You want purpose. You want someone strong enough to match you, to challenge you, to demand your best. I see it in the way you approach your lessons, the way you argued with Katya, the way you push yourself to excel at everything I ask of you." He was too close, too warm, too overwhelming. I should have pushed him away, should have maintained the distance we'd carefully constructed. But my hands went to his chest instead, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. "This is insane," I breathed. "Perhaps. But sanity is overrated." He leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear. "I could take what I want. You are my wife. I have every legal right. But I want you willing. I want you to choose this. Choose me. Why does it matter if I'm willing? Because I have taken many things in my life, Rory. Power, money, lives. But I have never taken a woman who didn't want me. I will not start now." The confession was unexpected, vulnerable. It showed me a side of Constantine I hadn't seen before. A man with his own code, his own twisted sense of honor. "I need time," I said, hating how shaky my voice sounded. "How much time?" "I don't know." He pulled back, studying my face. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded. "1 more week. 7 days. Use them to decide. But understand, Rory, my patience has limits. I will have my heir. Whether you come to me willingly or I simply stop asking permission, the result will be the same. It was a threat wrapped in courtesy, a reminder that for all the freedom he'd given me, for all the respect he'd shown, I was still his property in the eyes of the law. "That's not a choice," I said bitterly. "That's an ultimatum." "Yes," he agreed, "because I am a pragmatist, not a romantic. 1 week, Rory. Make your decision." He left me standing there, my heart racing, my mind a chaos of conflicting thoughts and emotions. 1 week to decide if I would willingly give myself to a man I'd been forced to marry. 1 week to accept my fate or fight a battle I couldn't possibly win. I spent that week in a haze of anxiety and confusion. Part of me wanted to run, to find a way out, any way out, rather than submit to Constantine's demands. But the rational part of my brain knew running was impossible. Even if I made it out of Moscow, even if I found my way back to America, Constantine would make good on his threats. My family would die, and I would be hunted down and brought back. I was trapped. The only question was whether I would accept my cage gracefully or keep throwing myself against the bars until I bled. On the third day, I sought out Irina. "I need to ask you something," I said, finding her in the kitchen overseeing dinner preparations. "Yes, Mrs. Volkov? Has he done this before? Married someone young for an heir?" Irina's expression grew guarded. "That is not my story to tell. Please, I need to understand him. I need to know if—" I struggled for words. "If I'm just one in a long line of girls he's used this way." She studied me for a long moment, then gestured for me to follow her to a small sitting room off the kitchen. Once the door was closed, she spoke in a low voice. "Mr. Volkov was married once before. Long time ago. Her name was Natasha. They married when he was young man. Maybe 25. She was his age, from good family. They loved each other very much. I hadn't expected that. What happened? She became pregnant. Mr. Volkov was very happy. He wanted family, wanted to build future, but—" Irina's expression darkened. "His enemies learned of the pregnancy. They attacked. Natasha was killed, along with unborn child. Mr. Volkov almost died protecting her. Those scars on his body? From that night. Horror washed over me. That's terrible. After that, he changed. Became harder. More ruthless. He swore he would never love again. Never have family. Never give his enemies such weapon. For 40 years he kept that promise. Until now. But why now? Why me? Because he is old? Because he sees his empire, everything he has built, and knows it will die with him. Because maybe, after 40 years, he is tired of being alone." Irina met my eyes. "He chose you carefully, Mrs. Volkov. Not random girl. He investigated. He learned about you. He saw strength. In you. Intelligence. Fire. You remind him of Natasha." The revelation shifted something in my understanding of Constantine. He wasn't just a monster demanding an heir. He was a man who'd lost everything once and was making one final attempt to build something lasting. It didn't excuse his methods, didn't make my situation any less coercive, but it gave context to his actions, made him more human and less like the villain I'd built him up to be in my mind. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "You are a good woman, Mrs. Volkov. Strong. Brave. I think you could be happy here, if you let yourself." Could I? Could I find happiness in a marriage that started with coercion and threats? Could I build a life with a man who'd bought me like property? I didn't know. But I had 4 days left to figure it out. On the 7th day, I went to Constantine's room. It was late, past midnight. I'd spent hours pacing my own quarters, arguing with myself, until finally, the exhaustion of indecision drove me to action. I knocked on his door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Come, his voice called from inside. I opened the door and stepped into his domain. His bedroom was masculine and austere, dark wood furniture, minimal decoration, everything precise and controlled. Constantine sat in a leather chair by the window, a glass of vodka in one hand, a book in the other. He wore black silk pajama bottoms and nothing else, and for the first time, I saw the full extent of the scars Irina had mentioned. They covered his torso, thin white lines, thick raised tissue, the puckered evidence of bullet wounds. His tattoos wove between them, a serpent coiling up his right arm, Cyrillic text across his chest, other symbols I didn't recognize. It was a map of violence, a testament to survival. He looked up when I entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Rory, I've made my decision," I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. And? I closed the door behind me, took a breath, made my choice. "I'm here, aren't I?" Something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or hunger. He set down his book and his glass, his attention now fully on me. "Are you sure?" he asked, and I heard the weight of the question. He was giving me one final out, one last chance to walk away. "No," I admitted. "I'm terrified. I'm angry. I still think this whole situation is insane, but—" I moved closer, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. "But I'm tired of fighting a battle I can't win. I'm tired of being afraid. And maybe there's a way forward that doesn't involve me hating every moment of my life." "That's not exactly a ringing endorsement," he said dryly. "It's the truth. I thought that's what you wanted from me. Honesty?" "I do." He stood, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. "But I need to know you understand what you're consenting to. I will not be gentle, Rory. I will not pretend this is a love match. What I offer you is partnership, protection, and purpose. In exchange, I expect loyalty, heirs, and your full commitment to this life. Is that acceptable?" It was the most clinical negotiation of intimacy I could imagine, but it was also honest, clear, free of false promises and romantic delusions. "It's acceptable," I said. He reached out, his hand curling around the back of my neck. "Then understand this. Once we cross this line, there is no going back. You will be mine in every sense of the word. Your body, your future, your children. All mine. Do you accept these terms?" Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I'd learned in the past 3 months that sometimes the only way forward was through. "I accept," I whispered. He pulled me against him, and his mouth found mine. The kiss was nothing like I'd expected. It wasn't brutal or punishing. It was controlled, thorough, devastating. He kissed me like he had all the time in the world, like he wanted to learn every inch of my mouth, like he was laying claim to something he'd waited a lifetime to possess. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "Last chance to walk away," he murmured against my lips. "No," I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. "No more walking away." He lifted me as easily as if I weighed nothing, carrying me to his bed. And as he laid me down on the dark sheets, as his hands began to explore my body with the same methodical thoroughness he brought to everything, I realized that I'd stopped thinking of him as the enemy. I didn't love him, but I didn't hate him either. What I felt was more complex, a mixture of respect, fear, fascination, and something darker I didn't want to name. As his body covered mine, as he took what I'd offered with a hunger that left me breathless, I understood that this was my life now. I was Konstantin Volkov's wife, and I would bear his heir. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, as pleasure began to build in places I'd never known existed, as his voice murmured praise and commands in Russian against my skin, I felt something unexpected. Power. He'd bought me, trapped me, forced me into this situation. But in this moment, as he lost control in my arms, as I felt the evidence of his need and desire, I realized I wasn't entirely powerless anymore. I'd found the weapon I could use against him, and I fully intended to learn how to wield it. The morning after was awkward. I woke alone in Constantine's bed, sunlight streaming through the windows, my body aching in unfamiliar ways. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then memory crashed over me, and embarrassment heated my face. I'd slept with him. Willingly. More than that, I'd enjoyed it. Far more than I wanted to admit. A knock on the door made me grab the sheet, pulling it up to cover myself. Yes? Irina entered, carrying a tray with breakfast. Her expression was carefully neutral as she set it on the bedside table. Mr. Volkov asked me to bring you this. He has business this morning, but will see you at dinner. Of course. Life went on. One night didn't change the fundamental nature of our arrangement. Thank you, Irina. She paused at the door. Mrs. Volkov, are you well? The genuine concern in her voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I don't know. Am I supposed to be? That is for you to decide. But... She hesitated, then spoke carefully. Mr. Volkov seems different this morning. Lighter somehow. I think perhaps last night was important to him too. After she left, I ate breakfast slowly, trying to process my feelings. I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I'd given Constantine what he wanted, and in doing so, I'd bound myself to him in a way that went beyond legal contracts and threats. The question was, what came next? The answer came 3 weeks later. I was in the library, reading a Russian novel and feeling rather proud of myself for understanding most of it, when a wave of nausea hit me so suddenly I barely made it to the bathroom in time. I'd been feeling off for days, tired, slightly dizzy, more emotional than usual. I'd attributed it to stress. But as I knelt on the cold marble floor, retching into the toilet, a terrible suspicion formed. Irina found me there 20 minutes later. Mrs. Volkov, are you ill? I don't know. I think I might need to see a doctor. She helped me back to my room, her expression knowing. I will call Dr. Petrov immediately. The doctor arrived within the hour, the same one who'd examined me before the wedding. This time, his examination was gentler, more congratulatory. When he finished, he smiled. Congratulations, Mrs. Volkov. You are approximately 3 weeks pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant. I was pregnant with Constantine's child. I'd known it was possible. Probable even. But hearing it confirmed made it terrifyingly real. Are you certain? I whispered. Very certain. The blood test confirms it. You should take it easy for the next few weeks. No strenuous exercise. Plenty of rest. I will monitor you closely. After he left, I sat on my bed in stunned silence. There was a life growing inside me. Constantine's heir. The whole purpose of this arrangement was now fulfilled. Part of me was horrified. I was 20 years old, pregnant by a 67-year-old crime boss I'd been forced to marry. This wasn't how my life was supposed to go. But another part of me, a part I barely recognized, felt something else. A strange sense of accomplishment, purpose. I'd done what was required of me. I'd secured my family's safety. And more than that, this child was mine too. Not just Constantine's. Mine. The thought was both terrifying and oddly comforting. When Constantine came home that evening, I was waiting for him in his study. He took one look at my face and knew. You saw the doctor? Yes. And? I'm pregnant. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. A gesture so unexpected it left me breathless. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. Thank you, Rory. I stood there, held against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath my cheek, and realized something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't just about contracts and obligations anymore. This was real. The child growing inside me was real. And Constantine's reaction, the raw emotion I could feel in his embrace, that was real too. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know. But you are strong. You will be a magnificent mother." "How do you know?" "Because I have watched you grow from a terrified girl into a formidable woman. Because you have survived things that would have broken others. Because you have fire in you, Rory. Our child will inherit that fire." Our child. Not his child. Ours. The possessive pronoun should have bothered me. Instead, it made me feel less alone. "Everything changes now, doesn't it?" I asked. "Yes. Everything changes." He pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face. "You are carrying my heir. That makes you the most valuable thing in my world. I will protect you with everything I have. Do you understand?" I understood. I was no longer just his wife. I was the vessel carrying his legacy, his second chance at the family he'd lost 40 years ago. It should have made me feel more trapped. Instead, paradoxically, it made me feel safer. Because a man like Constantine protected what was valuable to him, and I had just become invaluable. The pregnancy transformed our relationship. Constantine became obsessively protective. Guards doubled around the estate. My lessons continued, but Alexei was forbidden from any training that might risk injury. Every meal was carefully prepared by nutritionists. The doctor visited twice a week. It was smothering and overwhelming and oddly touching. "You don't have to treat me like I'm made of glass," I told Constantine one evening, after he'd insisted I rest instead of taking my usual evening walk. "Women have been having babies for millennia. I'm not going to break." "You are carrying my child," he said simply. "I will take no chances. Your child has my DNA too, which means it's probably stubborn and resilient." He smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles that transformed his entire face. "Then it will be perfect." As my body changed, so did my perspective. I found myself thinking about the future in ways I never had before. What kind of mother would I be? What kind of life would this child have? Would they grow up in this world of violence and crime, or could I find a way to give them something better? I began to voice these concerns to Constantine during our dinners. "What happens to our child when they're older?" I asked. "Will they be expected to take over your business?" "That will be their choice," Constantine said carefully. "I will not force my path on them. But this world will be all they know. They won't have a real choice, will they?" He set down his fork, studying me. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know. Maybe that there should be options, a legitimate business they could run, something that doesn't involve violence and crime." "You want me to go legitimate?" There was amusement in his voice. "I want our child to have a choice. Real choice, not the illusion of it." Something shifted in his expression. "You said our child." "What?" "You called it our child. Not my child. Ours." I realized he was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking of the baby as just his. It was ours. A shared responsibility. A shared future. "Does that bother you?" I asked. "No." He reached across the table, taking my hand. "It pleases me greatly. It means you are thinking of us as a family, as partners." "We're not partners, Constantine. You bought me. I acquired you through a transaction, yes. But what we have become, that is more complex than simple ownership. You are my wife, the mother of my child, and increasingly, you are someone whose opinion I value. That sounds very much like partnership to me." I wanted to argue, but looking at our joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch, I couldn't deny that something had changed between us. I still didn't love him, but I'd stopped actively hating him. And in this strange, twisted situation, maybe that was close enough. When I was 5 months pregnant, everything changed. I was in the garden, enjoying one of the first warm days of spring when the shooting started. The sound of gunfire was unmistakable, sharp cracks that sent birds scattering from the trees. I froze, my hand instinctively going to my swollen belly as shouting erupted from inside the mansion. Alexei appeared at my side in seconds, his gun drawn. "Inside, now!" He half-dragged me toward the house, but we didn't make it. 3 men in black masks emerged from the tree line, weapons raised. Everything happened in slow motion. Alexei pushed me behind him, fired twice. One attacker went down. The others returned fire. Alexei stumbled, blood blooming on his shoulder, but he didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed my arm and hauled me toward the house with desperate strength. We made it to the door. Guards swarmed out, engaging the attackers. Alexei thrust me into Irina's arms. "Safe room. Go." Irina pulled me through the mansion's corridors. I could hear fighting, more gunfire, shouting, the crash of breaking glass. My heart hammered against my ribs, and the baby kicked frantically, as if sensing the danger. The safe room was hidden behind a false wall in the library. Irina shoved me inside, followed me in, and sealed the door behind us. The room was small, windowless, equipped with supplies and monitors showing various camera feeds throughout the estate. On the screens, I watched the battle unfold. Constantine's men fighting off the attackers, bodies falling, blood on the pristine marble floors, and Constantine himself, moving through the chaos with deadly precision. He wasn't hiding in safety. He was out there, fighting alongside his guards, his gun barking commands of death. "Who are they?" I gasped, watching the screens with horrified fascination. "Rivals, enemies. Does it matter?" Irina's face was pale but composed. "They came for Mr. Volkov. And for you. For me? You are pregnant with his heir. You are his weakness now. Kill you. Kill the baby. And they destroy him." The reality of my situation crashed over me with new clarity. I'd understood abstractly that Constantine had enemies, but seeing them attack his home, watching men die on those screens, I finally understood what it meant to be part of his world. My child would grow up in this, would always be a target, would never be truly safe. The fighting lasted 20 minutes. Then silence fell, broken only by the groans of the wounded. On the screens, I watched Constantine walk through his house, checking each fallen attacker. When he found one still alive, he knelt beside him and spoke. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw the fear in the wounded man's eyes. Then Constantine stood and shot him in the head. I turned away, bile rising in my throat. Irina's hand squeezed my shoulder. "He protects what is his," she said quietly. "This is who he is." When Constantine finally came for us, his clothes were splattered with blood. He opened the safe room door and his eyes found me immediately. "Rory, are you hurt?" "No. The baby. Is the baby?" "The baby's fine. Kicking like crazy. But fine." The relief on his face was profound. He pulled me out of the safe room and into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," he said against my hair. "I'm so sorry. This should not have happened." "Who were they?" "Dmitry Kuznetsov's men. The man you met at the gala. He saw an opportunity to take my territory, so he attacked while I was vulnerable." "Vulnerable?" Constantine pulled back, his hands framing my face. "Yes. Vulnerable. Because I care more about keeping you safe than I do about my business empire. Dmitry knew that. He tried to use it against me. What will you do?" "What I should have done years ago. End the threat permanently." The cold certainty in his voice sent chills down my spine. This was the Constantine I'd imagined when I first arrived. Ruthless, calculating, capable of terrible violence. But as his hands moved protectively over my belly, as I saw the fear slowly fading from his eyes, I realized something important. He'd been terrified. Not for himself, for me, for our child. This violent, dangerous man cared about us, genuinely cared, enough to risk everything to keep us safe. The revelation shifted something fundamental in my chest. The aftermath of the attack was brutal. Constantine disappeared for 3 days. I didn't ask where he went or what he did. But when he returned, Irina quietly informed me that Dmitry Kuznetsov and his entire organization had been removed from the equation. The mansion was repaired. New guards were hired. Security was tripled. And Constantine changed. He'd always been controlled, but now he was different. Softer with me, more present. He began coming home earlier, spending evenings talking about the baby's future. He showed me properties he was considering purchasing, a villa in Italy, a chateau in France, places far from Moscow, far from the violence. I want options, he explained. When the baby comes, I want you to be able to choose where you feel safest, where you want to raise our child. You're giving me choices? I asked, surprised. Yes. Real choices. Not the illusion of them. He was listening. Actually listening to the concerns I'd voiced. One evening, when I was 7 months pregnant and uncomfortable in every possible way, Constantine found me in the library. I'd been trying to read, but the baby was using my bladder as a punching bag and I couldn't concentrate. He sat beside me, reaching out to rest his hand on my swollen belly. The baby kicked against his palm and his face lit up with wonder. Strong, he murmured. Like the mother. Your child is going to be a soccer player, I grumbled. I haven't slept through the night in weeks. I'm sorry, he said, and he actually sounded it. Is there anything I can do? Turn back time and give me my old life back? I suggested wryly. Instead of getting defensive, he was quiet for a moment. Then, do you regret it? This life, this child. I thought about lying, but we'd built something on honesty and I wouldn't destroy it now. I regret how it started. I regret not having a choice. But the child? I placed my hand over his, feeling our baby move beneath our joined palms. No, I don't regret this. And us? What about us? Do you regret becoming my wife? It was a loaded question. The honest answer was complicated. Ask me in a year, I said instead. When I've had more time to adjust. He smiled. Fair enough. But know this, Rory. I do not regret it. You have given me something I thought was lost forever. Hope. Purpose. A reason to build instead of simply destroy. I haven't done anything, I protested. You've done everything. His hand moved from my belly to my face, gentle despite the calluses. You survived. You adapted. You grew strong when you could have broken. You are carrying my child and making me think about the future in ways I never have before. That is not nothing. The sincerity in his voice made my throat tight. This man, this complicated, violent, dangerous man, cared about me. Not just as a vessel for his heir, but as a person. When had that happened? When had I started to matter to him? More importantly, when had he started to matter to me? Constantine, I said quietly. What are we doing? Really? Building a family, building a life, building something that lasts. In a world of violence and crime? I'm working on that. He pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed, handed it to me. I've been meeting with lawyers, setting up legitimate businesses, museums, art galleries, real estate development. Things our child can inherit without fear. Things that don't require violence to maintain. I stared at the documents in shock. You're serious. I told you I value your opinion. You wanted our child to have choices. I'm creating them. This must be costing you, politically, among your associates. Let them complain. They are not carrying my heir. You are. And what you want matters more than their approval. It was the closest he'd come to saying he cared about my happiness, and it shook me to my core. I wasn't supposed to develop feelings for this man. He'd bought me, forced me into this marriage. I should hate him. But I didn't. Somewhere along the way, through the lessons and the dinners and the slow building of trust, I'd stopped seeing him as just my captor. I'd started seeing him as my partner. I went into labor 3 weeks early on a cold November night. Constantine was in a meeting when it happened. Irina called him immediately, and he arrived home 20 minutes later to find me pacing the bedroom, breathing through contractions. "Hospital!" he barked at his guards. "Now!" "No." I grabbed his arm. "Too dangerous. The doctor is on his way here. I want to deliver at home." "Rory, that's not—" "Your enemies know every hospital in Moscow. They don't know about your private medical wing. I'm safer here." He wanted to argue. I could see it in his face. But he also recognized the logic. "Fine. But if anything goes wrong, then you panic and take me to the hospital. But until then, we do this here." Dr. Petrov arrived with a full medical team. They'd converted one of the bedrooms into a sterile delivery room weeks ago, just in case. As another contraction hit, Constantine helped me toward it. Labor was brutal. 14 hours of agony that left me sweating and swearing and questioning every choice that had led to this moment. Constantine stayed with me the entire time. He held my hand, endured my screams and insults, let me squeeze his fingers until I thought they'd break. When I was too exhausted to continue, he whispered encouragement in Russian, words I'd learned well enough to understand. "You are strong. You are magnificent. You can do this." Finally, as dawn broke over Moscow, I pushed one last time, and our daughter entered the world. The cry that filled the room was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Dr. Petrov cleaned her quickly, checked her vitals, then placed her in my arms. She was tiny, perfect. Her eyes were tightly closed, her face scrunched up in outrage at being forced from her warm cocoon. A shock of dark hair crowned her head. "A girl," I breathed, unable to look away from her. Constantine stood frozen, staring at his daughter with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Wonder, fear, love so profound it was almost painful to witness. "May I?" he asked quietly. I handed her over, watched as he cradled her against his chest with surprising gentleness. His daughter looked impossibly small in his large, scarred hands. "Hello, little one," he murmured in Russian. "I have waited a lifetime to meet you." Watching them together, this violent man and this innocent child, broke something open in my chest. This was real. We were a family now. Whatever had started as coercion and contracts had transformed into something genuine. "What should we name her?" I asked. Constantine looked up, tears shining in his eyes. "Natasha, after my first wife, if you approve." I should have been jealous, should have resented being compared to a dead woman. But I understood what he was offering. He was honoring the past while building a future, connecting the family he'd lost with the family we'd created. "Natasha is perfect," I agreed. Our daughter, Natasha Volkova, yawned and settled more comfortably against her father's chest, and Konstantin Volkov, one of the most feared men in Russia, smiled like the sun breaking through clouds. The first few weeks with Natasha were chaos. She was a terrible sleeper, crying every 2 hours without fail. I was exhausted, emotional, overwhelmed by the reality of being responsible for this tiny human. But Constantine surprised me. He hired nurses, yes, but he also participated, changed diapers, walked the floors with her when she wouldn't settle, learned to give bottles so I could sleep. You don't have to do this, I told him one night, finding him in the nursery at 3 a.m., rocking Natasha while humming a Russian lullaby. She's my daughter. Why wouldn't I? Because you, important, busy. Most men in your position wouldn't. I am not most men. He looked down at Natasha's sleeping face. I lost one child already. I will not waste a single moment with this one. The confession made my heart ache. This man who'd seemed so cold and calculating was capable of profound love. I just hadn't seen it until now. As weeks turned to months, I watched Constantine transform. His business associates complained about his increased absences. His enemies probably plotted, sensing weakness. But he didn't care. He came home every evening to hold his daughter, read to her in Russian and English, showed her picture books and explained art with the same seriousness he'd bring to a business negotiation. She's 4 months old, I laughed, watching him describe the symbolism in a Renaissance painting to our child. She can't understand you. She will learn. And when she does, she will already know beauty, already understand value. On Natasha's 6-month birthday, Constantine called me to his study. I went, curious, to find him standing by the window with a folder in his hands. "What's this?" I asked. "Your freedom," he said simply, handing it to me. Inside were documents, property deeds, bank accounts, all in my name. "I don't understand," I said, scanning the papers. "You asked me once if you would ever have real choices. This is my answer. The villa in Tuscany is yours. The account contains enough money to support you and Natasha comfortably for life. There's also a passport for you, a legitimate one, and documentation to establish a new identity if you want it." My heart began to race. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you can leave. Take Natasha and go. Build a new life somewhere safe, somewhere far from my world. I won't stop you. I won't chase you. I'm giving you the choice I never gave you before." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. "Why?" "Because I love you," he said simply. "And if you love someone, you give them freedom, even if it means losing them." The words hung in the air between us. He'd never said them before, had never even hinted at emotion beyond respect and partnership. "You love me?" I whispered. "Yes. Desperately. Completely. In a way I thought myself too old and too broken to feel again. You brought light back into my darkness, Rory. You gave me a daughter. You made me want to be better. And I cannot keep you prisoner while claiming to love you. So I'm setting you free." Tears blurred my vision. This man, this complicated, dangerous, beautiful man, was offering me everything I'd wanted when I first arrived in Moscow. Freedom, escape, a new life. But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I realized something crucial. I didn't want to leave. Somewhere in the past year, through fear and anger and slow-building trust, I'd fallen for him. Not the romantic fairy tale kind of love. Something deeper, more complicated, born from respect and partnership and shared experience. I loved him, and I loved the life we'd built together. "What if I don't want to leave?" I asked quietly. Hope flickered in his eyes. "Then you stay. Not as my property, not as an obligation, but as my wife, my partner, my choice, as I am yours." "And Natasha? She has both her parents, and a future filled with choices we create together." I set the folder aside and moved toward him, his arms wrapped around me, solid and warm and safe. "I'm not leaving," I said against his chest. "Not now. Maybe not ever. Because this is my life, Constantine. You're my husband. Natasha is our daughter. And I choose this. I choose us." He held me tighter and I felt moisture against my hair. This powerful man crying with relief. "Thank you," he whispered. Thank you for choosing me when you didn't have to. We chose each other, I corrected. Finally. Actually chose each other. And in that moment, surrounded by his strength, I understood something profound. Love wasn't always gentle. Sometimes it was forged in fire. Sometimes it started with force and transformed through time. Our beginning had been wrong, coercive, unforgivable by conventional standards. But what we'd built from those ashes, that was real. That was ours. That was worth fighting for. I was Rory Volkov, wife of a Russian crime boss, mother to his daughter. And I'd arrived at this life through circumstances I never wanted, but I was staying by choice, and that made all the difference. 2 years later, I stood on the balcony of our villa in Tuscany, watching Constantine play with Natasha in the garden below. She was running through the flower beds, her dark curls bouncing, her laughter ringing through the warm afternoon air. He chased her slowly, deliberately letting her escape, his own deep laughter mixing with hers. My hand rested on my swollen belly, 7 months pregnant with our second child. A son this time, if the doctors were correct. Moscow felt like another lifetime. Constantine had moved most of his operations to legitimate businesses, retaining only enough of the old world to maintain his protection and connections. We split our time between Russia and Italy, giving Natasha, and soon her brother, exposure to both cultures. I was fluent in Russian now, could hold my own in any conversation, had become the kind of woman who navigated high society with ease while maintaining the fire that had first attracted Constantine's attention. But more than that, I'd become a mother, a wife, a partner in every sense. Constantine looked up and caught me watching. Even from this distance, I could see the love in his expression. He said something to Natasha, who waved enthusiastically at me. "Mama, come play." I waved back, smiling. "Soon, my love." Constantine left Natasha with her nanny and came to join me on the balcony. His hand found mine, our fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That command you gave me. That first day." I looked at him. "Give me an heir." I remember. It was poorly phrased. Arrogant. "It changed my life forever," I said. "I hated you for it." "I know. Do you still?" "No." I turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd bought me, claimed me, and somehow loved me into choosing him back. "I don't hate you at all. In fact," I paused, letting myself feel the weight of the words. "I love you. Completely. Impossibly. Against all logic and reason." His eyes softened. "And I love you. My fierce Rory. My partner. My choice." "Our daughter is calling us," I said, hearing Natasha's impatient voice from below. "Let her wait one more moment." He kissed me, slow and deep, with all the passion of a man who'd thought he'd lost the chance at happiness and found it anyway. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I'd started this journey as a captive, a girl sold to pay off debts, expected to provide an heir and ask nothing in return. But I'd become so much more. A woman of strength and fire, a mother raising her children in 2 worlds, a wife to a man who'd learned that love meant freedom. Constantine had claimed me with a command, but I'd chosen him with my heart. And in the end, that choice was the only one that mattered. We walked down to the garden together, hand in hand, to join our daughter in the sunshine. Our family, our choice, our future. The man who'd demanded an heir had received so much more. And the girl who'd thought herself trapped had discovered a freedom she never imagined. Not the freedom to leave, but the freedom to love, to choose, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of our beginning. He'd claimed me, but I'd chosen him. And that made all the difference.